people out there in the dark, thank you again for checking in. I wanted to talk to you a little bit about the attorney and author, Erle Stanley Gradner. And I don't panic if you've not heard of him, though you should have. He's less famous for being an attorney and more famous for being an author. He's the gentleman who created Perry Mason. Now, Mr. Gradner wrote over 100 novels in his lifetime. 100 novels! I've written one, and it's barely a novel. It's really more of a novella, and that took me a couple of years to complete. He wrote 100. So in his time, he was a prolific writer. And Perry Mason is a character that transcends time, quite frankly. But Mr. Gradner was born in 1889. He died in 1970. He was 80 years old when he passed. I think it was March. He moved with his family from Massachusetts out to California. He actually graduated Palo Alto High School. And he ended up going back to law school in Indiana, the Valparaiso School of Law. But interestingly enough, he got kicked out or suspended because Mr. Gradner dug boxing. Undeterred by that, he basically came back to California, and in 1911, he passed the bar. Now, back then, having a law degree wasn't a prerequisite to pass the bar. So in 1911, he becomes an attorney. He's essentially a trial lawyer, and his focus is defending the disadvantaged and the disenfranchised, basically poor folks, in particular the Chinese and Mexican immigrants of that time period. So much so that he actually later in his life creates a program that's called the Court of Last Resorts in the 40s, or last resort in the 40s, to help people who were falsely imprisoned, people who were unfairly treated, accused of crimes they didn't commit, etc., etc. And it was a focus for him for a lot of years. In 1917, he opened his own law office in Merced. But ultimately, the legal practice bored him. I think the actual day-to-day activity was just mundane, and he wasn't very interested in it. Now, he started writing short stories and stuff for pulp magazines, detective stories, and his very first one was published in 1923. 1923! That's almost 100 years ago. And he created some characters like Lester Leith, who's kind of the gentleman thief, sort of. Ken Corney, who is the crusading lawyer, who quite frankly becomes the archetype for Perry Mason. And Perry Mason, those books obviously become the inspiration for the television series that aired on CBS from like 1943 to 1955 and starred Raymond Burr. Very, very good series. Go to Hulu, Netflix, Amazon Prime, Google, YouTube. I'm sure you can find that series on one of those streaming services. Coincidentally, Mr. Gradner, in the very last episode of Perry Mason, which I think is called like Fade to Black or Fade Out, he plays a judge on that final episode. Back though, when he was writing pulp novels, he tasked himself with writing 1.2 million words a year because he got paid 3 cents a word by those magazines, which if you do the math quickly, that's about $36,000 a year, which is a tidy sum of money in the 1920s. We're coming out of the Depression, or going into the Depression. And one of the things that people always used to say is that his hero always seemed to wait to the last bullet in the gun to kill the villain or the bad guy. And Gardner is famous for saying, yeah, when you get paid 3 cents a word, you're going to use every bang in that gun to the very last one to catch the bad guy. Now, his very first novel, or Perry Mason novel, is The Case of the Velvet Claws, was published in 1933. It was a big hit. And if you've not read any Perry Mason novels, The Case of the Velvet Claws is a good one. The Case of the Drowsy Mosquito, The Case of the Careless Kitten are all worth some of your attention. It's always the case of the, so it would be what, TCOT, boom, TCOT, boom. His first novel in 1933, The Case of the Velvet Claws, and then his last novel, published while he was alive in 1968, was The Case of the Famous Fake. Two additional novels were published after he passed away, but I don't honestly know the name of those. There's actually also, I think it was HBO or Showtime, had a Perry Mason series a year or so ago, much darker than the original series that aired on CBS. It was a good show, a little darker, and quite frankly, it kind of lacked the heart that the original Perry Mason with Aaron Burr had. But one of the reasons I even bring this gentleman up is he actually moved to Temecula, California in 1937. And that house still stands today and is actually for sale. It's $799,000. It's 2,800 square feet. It's a 4-bedroom, 4-bath. Though it didn't start out that way. It was much smaller. But while Mr. Gradner lived there, he called it Ranch del Paisano, which I think is kind of funny. Once he passed away, I think it had been sold a couple of times, and then in 2001, it was sold to the Pechanga Indians, who changed the name to the Great Oak Ranch, and it eventually becomes part of the Pechanga Reservation, just a couple miles south of the Pechanga Casino Complex. But the house, like I said, is currently for sale, and we're going to go take a look at it. I thought it was just really interesting because there's another famous person who lived here in the area. And we've talked about Amy McPherson, the famous hooplehead evangelist. We've got Bela Lugosi. We've got Jackie Coogan. And now we have Erle Stanley Gradner. So, well, here, take a look. Here's a couple of pictures of Mr. Gradner and a couple of pictures of the novels that he wrote. I really think if you like to read, they're good reads. He doesn't really, his characters aren't terribly complex. They're pretty two-dimensional, but his stories, his plot details are quite involved, and you see that in the series. And keep in mind, when you watch the series, the 40s and 50s, it is the 40s and 50s. So there's certain things they can't do. But his characters are, like I said, are generally two-dimensional, but his plot twist and the depth of his plots are somewhat complex. And as I understand it, a lot of them were taken from his real-life experiences, as an attorney for those years, helping the Chinese and the Mexicans and the downtrodden and all those who can't help themselves. But anyway, take a look. Here's a few photographs of Mr. Gradner, a couple of photographs of covers of his novels, and then we'll take a quick peek at the home that's actually presently for sale. And as always, if you go see his home, be respectful. Someone actually lives there. This is private property, even though it's part of the reservation. You don't want to disturb the occupants or walk on flowers, do anything like that. There's no reason to. There's no reason for any of that. But quite frankly, because I'm going to go there and take that chance. Let's go. So I just arrived at the former home of Erle Stanley Gradner, and he was an attorney who wrote over 100 detective novels,
some of which became the inspiration for the Perry Mason television series. Yes, that's right, the Perry Mason television series. Now this home, it's actually for sale. It's in the town of Temecula. It was built in 1948. They want $799,000 for this 2,800 square foot, 4-bedroom, 4-bath home. And I guess its claim to fame, as I said, it was once occupied by Mr. Gardner. So we're going to get out and take a quick look. Hope you like it. So here is the home. The part here with all the stone is obviously the original portion. Other portions have been added on over the years. Just absolutely amazing. Look at the size of that pine tree. Again, that door is just amazing. Chimney. I'm told that home there used to be his girlfriend's home. And then actually in the back, that old barn back here got some old cars that have just rotted to the ground, but this was all part of his property. And this garage here used to be like an auto shop, repair shop, back before this road was paved, and it was all dirt. All this old stonework from the 40s. Just amazing. How super cool is this house? If I had $800,000, well, if I had $800,000, I probably wouldn't buy this house, but it's pretty amazing. Again, I'm not going to go all the way to the back. Again, the stone is the original house, and then obviously added on here and here over the years to get that 2,800 square feet. But I'll give you
So there you have it, Erle Stanley Gardner's house, the creator of Perry Mason. His house is for sale, $800 grand. I thought it was pretty cool. I hope you did too. You know, if you've got $800,000 lying around, and maybe you could be inspired working in his house and write 100 novels yourself. If I had $800,000, that's probably what I would do. Well, maybe not. I could spend $800,000 better than buying that house. But anyway, in this world, when you could be anything you want to be, you'd be kind, you'd be humble, you'd be forgiving, and you'd be melting snow. Bye-bye.